I was on an inner journey, inner healing versus performing or expressing my views or thoughts online because I had to find my voice. What would the world look like if people felt like they mattered? Welcome to the Lead with Love podcast, exploring what it means to lead with love in business and life. I'm your host, Jada Selner, and in this show, I'll share meaningful conversations to help you, the creative, the entrepreneur, the world changer, reach more people, go after your dreams, and serve your community with love. I appreciate you joining me. Now, let's get cozy and start today's episode. Hello. I'm back. Lead with Love Season 3. And today I'm having an intimate conversation with my amazing right hand, Michele. Michele, say hi.
Hello.
So today is not necessarily a solo episode, but a personal conversation with my amazing right hand, Michele. And we just wanted to really unpack where I've been. And something that I've shared recently is I'm not hiding, I'm healing. And so we're going to explore what that means and how creating, connecting, and healing behind the scenes as I took a very intentional pause on the podcast. And I'm super excited to dive back in. And for those of you who don't know, Michele, you have been on my team, Community Happiness Director.
Yes.
For how long has it been now?
Is it 6 years? 5 years.
Yeah, over 5
years. Yeah. 5 wonderful years.
And Michele has been a rock for me, which is why I really want to have her on this conversation just to help guide my coming back. Because you've actually been a part of the bigger picture of my story when I was still working with Simple Green Smoothies. And I was just starting this side personal brand. Could you just share a little bit about just where you entered the scene in coming in, just painting the picture of what that looked like, where I was in my business and where you kind of just came in? I think you started at like 5 hours a week, right?
I did. So we had a connection call, and I think we were connected by one of my clients at the time. And, she said, there's this woman, Jada, who's doing like great things in the world, and just to have a call to see if I could support you. And yeah, at the time you were still with Simple Green Smoothies, and you were starting to make that big, brave leap into building your personal brand. And I know it might make you feel weird, but like when we first got on the call, I was like, oh my goodness, like I just love her, because like your authenticity and like your warmth, and it just really came through. And so I was like hooked. I'm like, Jada, you have some type of magic. I don't know what it is, but it's something that just attracts you to people. And I think one of the biggest blessings that I've have had working with you these 5 years is that you're always the same, so it's like the Jada that's, silly and funny and grounded and like a business genius, and just you're a nurturer and you can hold space like so beautifully for people. Like you're like that all the time. Yeah, I just love working with you and being in your world and playing a small part in whatever you're building and whatever you're up to. And I know it seemed like there wasn't a lot happening over this past year or so, but one thing about you is whether you're healing or building, you're always moving forward. And so I kind of wanted you to share a little bit about what's been happening. You have shared a little bit on social media about some big losses that you've had in your life, but I was wondering if you could kind of let us know what was going on for you internally and in your world.
Yeah. So I've shared little bits and pieces, and also I'm really, tender with myself, and when I'm in a healing journey to really keep that in my close circle of friends. So I try not to overshare online, but I have shared in bits and pieces in the podcast of last year was a really intense year of loss. In June of last year, I lost my father at the age, he was 60 years old, but I hadn't had a relationship with him in over 20 years. And so just to kind of really navigate that grief, which was never, it was like an extended grief of not being able, just like, oh, will I ever connect with him or talk to him again? And so, and it was, a decision that he had made to not be in our lives. And so just that reckoning, that happened of losing my father, and also something, my father is African American, and I realized how much I was closing that part of my identity off in a way too. And so there was also, I feel like there's this reckoning and reclamation of my Black identity, losing him, and then trying to find that essence and holding those parts of him that I really loved. And he actually was a huge gift to my entrepreneurial journey. I learned how to spell entrepreneur when I was 9 years old, and that was because of him. He was always that person that would say, do what you love, marry someone who does what they love. I don't care if they're a garbage man, but like they need to love what they do. So that's really been at like the heart of my work, has really stemmed from that conversation from him. So even though there was a lot of hurt and heartbreak and loss and loneliness and abandonment and all those pieces, I think that's one huge reason why I'm such a nurturer and such a community builder, and wanting people to be seen and heard and not feel alone. Because there was that separation from my father, and he actually died alone. Nobody actually knew he had passed away 6 months before the whole family found out. Like nobody,
oh my God,
nobody knew. And so I'm like on the opposite spectrum of that, of building community and relationships with people, because I don't want to be alone. I think as humans, we need that connection. We need other humans to share our lives with and do this journey that is challenging and confronting. So that was really, really intense, because I had to kind of reconnect with my siblings, who we had all kind of been a little bit separated as well. And like, this was like something where we had to rally together and figure out how to manage his estate. And it just
Which is not simple, I'm assuming.
No. Yeah. And so, that was happening in the summer of last year. And then, just a few months later, my husband, daughter, and I, we went to Kauai to visit my family. And as we were there for a long extended trip, we actually had to cut it short. Our dog of 13 years old, we had Clementine before Zoe was even born. So she was like our daughter. Like we'd be like, that's your grandbaby, Clementine. And, she got really, really sick, and we cut our trip short from Kauai and had to put her down as a family. It was, we probably cried as a family for 3 days. It was the end of August, and, making the decision, Zoe wanted to stay and be with her, and just witnessing her last breath. Something that I learned from that, one, just for Zoe to be able to see her dad cry. Like I thought that was such a gift for her to see him crying, and like us having this shared grief. Because I felt like the grief of my father, I really had to carry on my own, because my husband didn't have a relationship with my father, and he actually never met Zoe. And so that was like my own personal grief that I had to carry. And then we went into a collective grief as a family. And for anyone who has fur babies, like they are the exemplary of like unconditional love, like they are just there no matter what. And so being able to kind of also see that range of someone who was not in my life for 20 years, and then having someone who was in my life for 13 years, of like my marriage, us moving from LA to Kauai, and then Kauai to Northern California. Like Clementine she was just such a staple piece of love in our family. so that was a huge decision for us to make as a family, and just a lot of sadness. And we still miss her. Like, we're just like, oh, Clemmy. And
she was in your bio. I remember she made it to the bio.
She made it to my book bio. Yes. She forever lives on. That was really, such a tender thing for our family to go through. And Zoe, to this day, she has a box of her ashes, and like she prayed, like she's like, I pray to God and Clementine. Like, those are the two people she talks to at night before she goes to sleep. And I also think for, my daughter is an only child. And so like animals, like that's like they're like people, to really connect with and have those vulnerabilities and sadness. And so that happened.
A lot of heavy, Jada.
Yes.
Oh, goodness.
Yes. And all this, I'm like trying to launch my next, group coaching program and all of these pieces that are moving. And then we actually together, we launched a Love Over Metrics incubator and welcomed some amazing women into the program. I think we started that in October. And just a month later, so my little brother, he's my half brother, my bonus dad, and my mom had Max Jonah, and he passed away in a car accident on the island of Kauai where my parents live. And that was just a devastating, unexpected loss for our family. And
how old was his daughter?
16. He just celebrated his birthday just a month before. And things like that don't happen on small islands like that. Like, it's, Kauai is like a 2-lane highway type of place. And I was definitely in shock and didn't know what to do. But the only thing that I could do, my parents weren't sure what to do either. But the next morning, I hopped on a flight with my aunts, and we became like the angels of being their sidekicks in Kauai and just grieving together as a family. And, I left George and Zoe, home, and I just got on the next plane that I could that following morning, and really I had never experienced that type of loss because, again, we were just with Max, in just a few months before in Kauai. And so, we had a beautiful, amazing camping trip in Polahale with like just surrounded by the stars. Like, I'm so thankful that I got such a beautiful memory and experience with him. But I really had to press pause on business, and you really, really supported in that for me to just kind of unplug from the day-to-day of the business and the program that we were leading and guiding, to just really show up for my family. And I became like the concierge of like having everyone from the mainland come to Kauai and celebrate Max's life with a beautiful, beautiful paddle out, which is something that a lot of surfers do. And my brother, he's a surfer, and I know he's still surfing all kinds of big waves and hanging, with the stars and showing up in beautiful ways through butterflies and dragonflies and birds and flowers and all of those pieces. But it was a very beautiful way to honor his life. He lived a very rich life, got to travel the world. And, so that was 6 months. All of those losses happened in that 6-month time span.
And so what was your personal healing journey? What did that look like?
Yeah. So, I think the first step was being willing to pause on day-to-day responsibility. So you really came in to that space. And, I have coaches like my life coach, Rebecca McLaughlin, my BFF, Polly Pocket, Nikki Elledge Brown, really had people step in to the day-to-day of the business to really support my clients so that I could actually fully unplug and step away from, and I know you've witnessed this in me, but I'm a caretaker and I want to make sure everyone's taken care of. So I actually had a really hard time of letting go of supporting my clients so that I could fully heal and grieve. But I paused on business. So the last podcast episode, came out during that time when my brother had passed away. And I said, I need this space to fully grieve. And so any pieces of my business that I could pause, I did. And I didn't think twice about those pieces. Like I knew that I needed a lot of space. And I also had an amazing therapist that I'd been working with even before knowing my father had passed away. That was kind of really holding me to heal, to cry, to connect. And I also had to stretch my capacity to receive love. I think that was my biggest gift, my biggest lesson is I love to give love. I love to make people feel seen and heard and taken care of. And I had to really allow myself to receive help, receive like it's okay to not do anything. And so many of my friends showed and gifted me with things, healing elements, massages, flowers, just hip line dance classes, things that brought me joy. And I really had to honor and be gentle with myself and not talk to people. Like I'm a verbal processor. I love connecting with my people. And I think I had the capacity to talk to you, like just to make sure the business was still moving forward. And then also Nikki, like pretty much anyone else, I just couldn't, like nothing that they were talking about could really interest me. And I didn't have the capacity to like hold space or coach or strategize. Like I just like, what are the essentials that need to get done? And that's where I put my focus, my attention and energy. So it was really, having the support of my life coach, my therapist. Also, I danced. I did hip line. So staying in my body and not staying in my head and giving myself, just taking as much off my plate as I could. And one of those was definitely the podcast, to pause on podcast until I was ready. Like there was also this impulse to like, but they're going to miss me or they're going to forget about me and I paused on social media. I paused on the podcast and just did the bare minimum so that I had the space to grieve and heal.
You gave yourself the grace and space, right, to heal that you teach so many women about and me about. So I'm glad that you did that for yourself. And that was, so Max was in November of 2018?
Yeah.
Okay. And then here comes 2020.
Yes. Hello, 2020.
So what would you say about 2020 so far?
Yeah. So there's two sides of 2020 to me. So there's this Chinese symbol that, like how to say crisis in Chinese, there's two symbols that create that, which is one symbol is danger and the other symbol is opportunity. And so, and I'm 30% Chinese, like I'm 40% African, like my 23andMe is wild. I cover every continent is colored in except for Australia. I'm my 23andMe. So
wow.
Mostly West African, 30% Asian, and then 30% European. And there's some like, I'm got some Native American in there, maybe like not a lot, but I'm like, I cover all the continents. So anyways, the Chinese symbol of crisis really resonates with me. Of I see opportunity, and there's like a sense of danger, which is kind of where people tend to go when our nervous systems are shocked. And so I describe 2020 as crisis, like for the world, like we're in a crisis where there's opportunity and there's danger. And then for my own personal theme of how I describe 2020, and I'm talking about this inside my book that I've been writing, is like creative cocoon. So I've allowed myself to nest and create. And I love that you acknowledge, like, even if stuff is going on, that I'm still building or healing, whatever I'm doing, I'm still moving forward. I'm still growing in some way. And so even though you can't see anything on the outside, you would be like, Jada is falling off the face of the earth. I've been, definitely taking care of myself, my body, my relationships and healing, but I've also been creating inside this like safe bubble of a cocoon, because if I were to go out in the world, like they'd be like ripping open my cocoon and I'm not ready to like spread my wings just yet and be out there in the world. And so I definitely, I've been impacted in everything that's going on in the world. And it feels like collective grief that we've been
Mm-hmm.
experiencing as humanity of loss, of things burning down. I'm in Northern California, so we've been on fire for like months. But before that, there's, COVID-19
Mm-hmm.
and then another wave of, Black Lives.
Yeah.
What it feels like is like waves of grief, of like
Mm-hmm.
compounded grief that was like, we come up for air and then there's another wave crashing right over us and we have to go back under. And I remember actually on the Big Island when I was visiting my family, I almost drowned. It's not funny. Yeah. At Hapuna Beach, we were body surfing. There was an undertow like that was kind of, a rip current.
Mm-hmm.
And so my feet were on the ground. I was body surfing with my bonus dad. And then all of a sudden my feet weren't touching the ground anymore. And I like tried to reach for my bonus dad's hand and I like couldn't, like the waves were just holding me back and I couldn't swim back to shore. And so I just remember kind of like fading away from him. And he went with me. He was a strong enough swimmer that he could swim back to shore, but he actually stayed with me.
Mm-hmm.
And they just like pushed us to where these waves were just crashing and pushing us closer to like these big rocks. And so big waves were going over us. And he was like, go under, like actually surrender to the waves. Go under instead of resisting the waves that are crashing over and trying to swim against the waves pushing you down. Actually surrender, go under. Then once you kind of roll around, come back up, take a quick breath, and then you look behind you and another wave's coming to crash. So he coached and guided me through that process. And I feel like that's what 2020 feels like, of like, we actually have to surrender to the waves that are pushing us down instead of resisting it, because it's actually more effort to try to swim up, but actually to move with the waves that are crashing over us. And then when we can, when there's just a little teeny tiny break, come up, catch your breath real quick, and then you're going to get hit again. So that's what 2020 feels like to me, is this compounded grief, these compounded waves that keep coming at us. Mm-hmm. And so any moment of pause that there is, like, we have to really take care of ourselves and catch that breath of what's happening, because we won't have the capacity, the energy, the stamina if we resist what's happening. And it sucks. Like, no one wants to be in this like tumbling constantly over and over again, but we have to surrender to it and not resist it, so that we have the stamina to come out. And then at some point, my bonus dad was able to wave his hands and like literally it was like Baywatch. The people came out and like swam out to rescue us, and everyone on the beach was standing up, and my mom and George, they're like, who's out there? Like, they didn't even know it was us. And so we came off of shore because they were just like, where did George and Michael go? And like,
that's so scary.
Yeah, I will say that the lifeguards were pretty hot. Like, I was like, wow, these are like serious Baywatch rescue team over here. But yeah, that was traumatizing. And so our nervous systems are being impacted constantly right now. So it's collective grief. It's crisis with some, a dose of danger and also opportunity. And I've been creating inside my creative cocoon.
So can you share a little bit of what you've been creating?
Yeah. So I've been building behind the scenes, and I've been very quiet out in the world. So I think that what 2020 is inviting us to do is really take stock and inventory of what's working and what's not working. It's giving us a lot of space. And so usually, I'm traveling several times a quarter. Like, I'm on a plane, I'm going places for my squad trips. So this has really given me space. I was like, what would I want to accomplish by the end of 2020? And, the heart project that has been on my brain for so many years is writing my next book. And what's been hard is I talk about heart projects and cash projects. So heart projects are things that like your soul is calling you towards, that you just want to exist in the world, but it doesn't necessarily make you any money. And having a business and marketing brain like I do, I tend to prioritize cash projects. I'm like, oh, the cash project will fund the heart project, but we can get caught on the hamster wheel of constantly like just keep producing the cash and not focusing on the heart projects. And so I just got really clear that no matter what, even if it doesn't make me money, even if I make less money this year, by the end of this year, I want to move the book forward. And so that was the domino for me. And I ended up signing up for, I had a coach that I was working with, and I actually rested my book last June, with my father and everything. Like, I was working on the book consistently, and then I let it rest. And that was really hard to lay it down. And I was beating myself up too, of like, oh, I should already have a book proposal. And I was seeing other people putting their books out there, getting book deals. And so there was some tension for me of like, you need to just work on it now. But I knew I couldn't. And so I picked it back up this year, and I ended up writing 30,333 words for my manuscript in May in 3 days. I went that approach because I've been playing with a couple of different book outlines, and I just chose an outline. I signed up for this virtual book writing retreat by Tom Bird, which is all about writing from the divine author within and accessing that. So I've had my book coach, Asul, who I've had many conversations with, and I'll be talking to him this season as well about just extracting the stories and the soul of my book. Like, what do I actually want to say? And he got me to get to some different iterations of the book outline and table of contents. And then I went super woo with accessing the divine author within. And then I also have been doing some stuff with scribe writing through Tucker Max's program, which is really focusing on the marketing and the positioning. So it allowed me to bring the three things together, which is like, I have this marketing business brain, which gives like the structure. And then I'm also super tapped into creativity, to God, to source, to energy. So really writing from that place. And then I also just like, I want to write the book that my soul wants to write, not the best business strategy book. So I feel like I really allowed myself to be supported in those three different buckets of creativity. And that's really brought the book forward. And we're going to be shopping the book this month with my literary agent. I feel really excited. It's been such a creative love affair where I'm like, I wake up thinking about her, like about the book. Like, I'm like, I want to work on her. And also we're doing a website redesign. So I'm working with the same designer, Rachel Pesso, that we did this website over 6 years ago. So I'm doing a new photo shoot and kind of just stepping into this next chapter of my expansion and my expression of like deepening more of who I am and making sure that online that the outside matches the inside. Is there anything else? I mean, you know more than I do. What am I working on? What have I been doing?
Well, there's also going to be another product that will be coming out soon.
Yes.
Your first physical product. So you've been working on that too. And then supporting, women, which is what lights you up, I know, from the inside out. But
so
supporting the female founding women,
I got really clear on, so that clarity too of the women that I serve and get the best results for, and kind of pulling from all the iterations of things that we've been doing over the last couple of years with my vision and planning retreats. And so we're creating a physical planner. For like 3 months, we like created a prototype that we'll be testing. And so I think my vision is that would be out by, 2021 planning. And I think that's a huge thing to acknowledge too, of having a big vision and dream, giving it room, breathing room to unfold, not just in 90 days or 12 months, but I give my dreams, especially heart projects that I know can turn into cash projects. But if I want the soul to be embedded in that, and I want the process of creation to feel really good, then my big visions take about 3 years to unfold, to do it in a sustainable way that feels good and fun. Like, I want to look forward to my workday every day. And so pressuring myself on crunchy timelines, I just don't think gives a lot of space for creative visionaries. Like, we need to expand the timeline, which is why I always say, don't put a timeline on your dreams. You can put a timeline on your actions, but like for the completion of something, I think it takes more time to get the whole vision, the whole picture that the world can actually see. And I think that's the tension of creative visionaries is like, we see the big picture and we want it to happen like in the next 30 days. And it just takes more time for things to incubate. So yeah, I've been really giving myself the spaciousness. So there's a planner, there's a book, and then pulling out the vision retreats that I've been doing only behind the scenes with my private clients and group mastermind programs, is being able to make that accessible, especially for female founders and their teams, to be able to do this creative, strategic visioning process that I've been guiding my clients through, which I'll share a lot about that inside the book. It'll exist in the planner. And then for those who want to step away from their day-to-day and create time and space to think and dream and plan so that they can articulate their vision and their projects to their team without burning them out. That's become really clear of my magic, and really helping founders, especially founders who actually have traction and are established in their businesses. Like right now, I'm serving clients who are in the 500K revenue per year up to 5 million a year. And that's the range of business that I feel really good supporting and kind of helping them get to that next level.
Wow. So you really have
Business.
some huge projects, really huge projects that you're working on. I'm so excited to come along for the ride and see all the wonderful things that you're creating, and you're impacting like so many people around you, the women that you work with in your community, and you're such a light. And this year and a half that you've been healing, I just was in awe of you because you're so wise, wise about knowing when to work, when to take time, when you need to, either have acupuncture or when you need to have hip line, it's just such a wisdom about how you operate, and you pass on that wisdom to the women that are fortunate enough to work with you. So I think that's a pretty amazing thing, Jada.
Yeah.
you took this long break, and then you're working on your book and your planner, and really supporting women that are at a very high level. And you love what you do, and it comes across. And actually, as being a member of your team, like when you're working with a founder who's excited and motivated and loves what they do, it's so contagious. Is where I love, being a part of it. And I feed off of that energy. And even, with me, with the whole Black Lives Matter, that was for both of us, obviously we needed some time to process and grieve, like the whole country and the world was. And, you gave me like a mental health day, which just shows how aware you are of what we need, and also how giving that you are. And I know that we both had to deal with that and different emotions around that. Do you want to share?
Yeah. And I'm curious for you, like what has, being a Black woman, what's the experience been like for you, and also just navigating, because you are serving and supporting people with online businesses. Like what has it been like for you, and also being able to have, a mental health day? I was like, Michele, you get like, I'm going to give you money, but please do not work. Use it when you need it.
I was like, man, it was a lot. It was so many emotions so quickly, and as you were talking about like the waves and like the lesson that you learned from your bonus dad, I think is so powerful, just kind of go with the waves. Don't just like kind of fight it, but just kind of let it take you under and then come back up for breath. We had been dealing with COVID, and we had been dealing with, being quarantined, and then like Australia was on fire, California was on fire, like all these crazy things were happening. And then with, the whole Black Lives Matter movement, it was just, anger and being tired of being angry.
Yeah.
Wanting change, like being optimistic, but then saying, well, should I really be optimistic? Because, this kind of thing has happened before and nothing really has happened. So it was just, I guess, allowing myself to go through all of the emotion of it. And like even having 2 children, and like explaining to my children what's happening and like the world that we live in, because they're, live in a bubble.
Yeah.
A lot of times. But no, I really want them to understand the reality of where we live and like systemic racism and what they would encounter as, African American children. And so it was, giving myself, time to be angry. And then it's like, okay, well, what can I, moving past the anger, what can I do? How can I help, to support that movement? So, and I'm a very optimistic person.
Yeah.
So I've, in the end, I'm always believing that something good will happen. And the response that we got, like around the world, it was just, that made me feel held in a way, like, oh, there's so many people that care. There's more people that care. There's more people that are going to stand up and fight. It's not just going to go away. It's not going to dissipate this time. So that was really a beautiful thing to see, and to see even women like in our online community, like supporting each other. People would call me and check up on me. How are you doing emotionally? Like, I'm here to support you. So it was actually a time of community, being supported by each other.
Yeah. Well, I was curious, what did you say to and how old are your kids? And like, what were some things that you said to them that you felt landed? Or I'm always curious of just like, I think it helps people kind of figure out, how do we have these conversations?
Well, my son is 13 and he also has autism, and my daughter is 11. And they live in a pretty safe, world, sheltered, I would say, world. They're at the age where I just laid it down really for what it is. And I actually let them watch, like there's some documentaries that I let them watch. There's, some of the like footage, I let them watch. And then we just had conversations. So I just opened it up for conversation to listen to how they were feeling. And then, I shared like some of my personal experiences, some of my parents' experiences, and just how we've been impacted as a family from racism, like through the generations, that I knew of. So it's more of just the awareness, you know what I mean? I just want them to, see, hey, this is what we're dealing with, and this will be your fight,
Yeah.
It will be a fight for you. That was nice just to listen to them and, us to just kind of leaving the lines of communication open, not to hide it from them, but so they could see, what was happening.
Yeah. I love that kind of the recipe that I'm unpacking is being able to have like documentary or clips of things to share to give context and kind of tell the story, and then having a conversation around it, and then sharing personal experiences from yourself and from your family and generations. That feels like a very like simple recipe, and also very like it's, heavy conversations that we're having with our kids to be aware. And for me, I definitely went into shock. Like that's my trauma response is like shock and freeze, and I just seeing the bombardment of what was happening online and being in the online space and the online business space. I experienced a personal experience of being tokenized during like Blackout Tuesday and all of these things, and just realizing all these relationships that I've had and having to do my own reckoning of like, I'm usually the one or few women that speak on the stages that I speak on, and always the only woman of color. And so that as it was happening, where people were trying to highlight and uplift Black voices, there was also harm being done in that, the frantic rush of I got to do something to prove, which we call like being performative and not actually doing the inner work. So I was really impacted by that emotion. I'm not ready to be online when people are causing harm, and I have to find myself and my stance before I just start hopping on and being people's token of representation, of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so I just needed to be quiet and to unhook myself from the frantic energy that was happening online, because I am such an empath and I can take it on. And I needed to be clear, which is why I've been in such a deep creative cocoon. I signed up for a workshop with Resma, of the author of My Grandmother's Hands, that was for all Black women, to kind of connect and talk about the systemic racism and white supremacy that lives in bodies, and just how colonization happened, but doing it in a safe space and environment. I also followed Sebene of just kind of incorporating some also Buddhist philosophies into the anti-racism work and belonging and connection. So I was on an inner journey, inner healing versus performing or expressing my views or thoughts online, because I had to find my voice in the sea of voices. So that was my response. And I told many people, I'm like, I'm not on social media right now as a form of self-care. Like, I cannot subject myself to the drama while people are trying to find themselves in public and be messy, which is totally, totally okay. But if I allowed myself to be in that mix, that I would harm would be being caused to my nervous system. So I had to take a step back and just connect and communicate and express in my safe circle, so that I could find my own voice. I could hear my own voice in that process. And I had to find the gentle, kind, compassionate healers too, because I think that's really important for us to look for who are the voices, the teachers, the guides that resonate with our nervous systems. Because so often we can activate more trauma. This is the same even business coaches and stuff. There's certain coaches that just actually take us further away from who we are. And we lose ourselves, and then we wonder why we feel disconnected from our mission, from our why, from our vision, and you just feel burnt out and exhausted from doing work a certain way. So I think it's really important to look at who are the books that you're reading, the teachers, the healers. Does it resonate and activate you in a way that is kind to your nervous system? I think that piece is really important. So I listened and watched a lot of different videos to find resonance of the type of teachers, because I have to also unpack my own unconscious bias that lives in me, being a mixed race woman, being Black, Chinese, white. I don't know whose party, where am I supposed to hang out? I feel very confused of I'm not Black enough. I'm not white enough. I'm not Asian enough. I'm not anything. People think I'm Puerto Rican, or, it's they don't even think I am what I am. They're like, oh, you're Polynesian. I'm like, no. So that to me, and also that everything's a long game. There's short-term actions that we can take to move us closer, but the type of work that we have to do individually and collectively as a society cannot just be a 30-day course or 1 or 2 books. Okay, what's the learning that I need to do over the next 3+ years and beyond to understand systemic racism, to understand how am I contributing harm, because I'm probably causing harm as well unconsciously. So I have my own work to unpack and unravel. So I think it's really important for us to give ourselves time to also find our voice and our truth outside the sea of noise and news and social media that really disrupts the way that's our own inner guidance and truth.
Yeah. That's so good. Well, Jada, we're so happy to have you back and to hear from your wisdom. So if you could let us know, what does leading with love mean to you?
Yeah. Leading with love to me means really opening up our capacity to not only give love, to make people feel seen and heard and just valuable as they are, the enoughness, but also to receive that love and feel seen and heard from our own selves, and that we are worthy and valuable. So just this cyclical love of that we give and receive love. That's what leading with love means. And I know we, even in our work together, we express that of being able to acknowledge and celebrate each other and appreciate each other, but also celebrating and acknowledging ourselves in the process, I think is really important, is to be kind and loving and patient with ourselves really, really matters. And so, self-love of taking care of ourselves. And then we have the ability and the capacity and the energy to pour and give from the overflow. So it's not one-sided, because I think we can also be unconscious martyrs and just give and feel really depleted and empty from the inside. But as if we just self-love ourselves, we're missing why we're here on this earth, the humanity and the connection to others and our gifts and our talents, to be able to distribute that so other people can experience it and receive the support and help that you can give. So to me, leading with love is just a full circle of that we give and we receive. And I do that in marketing. I do that in my relationships with my family, with my friends, with my team members, with my clients, to really allow ourselves to give and receive, and making decisions from that place of following that impulse for generosity, and also being clear of honoring our capacity. If we don't have it in us, that doesn't mean that we're not loving or not leading with love. We're just honoring our boundaries and our energy so that we can sustain ourselves. So I really believe in leading with love from a sustainable perspective, that it's not one-sided.
Thank you, Jana.
Yeah. So thank you so much for just having this conversation with me. And I think my invitation for you who are listening is really taking stock and inventory of what's working in your life, and maybe what needs to be burned down or possibly paused, to really honor your capacity for this collective grief that we're experiencing. So I would ask you, really thinking about that, of what you have learned about yourself in this collective pause and uncertainty, and redefine what this new normal is going to be. Because I think that there's an awakening, because what was happening wasn't working. And we can look at it from a systemic level of society and the world, that there's an awakening, and what was normal before actually wasn't good for the whole. And so there has to be a shift. And then we can look at ourselves from an individual perspective of what is working individually and not working in our own lives, and what shifts can we make. I think is really being able to redefine what you want your next chapter to look like, and what needs to die so that you can fully come alive. So really taking stock and inventory of what's working, what's not working any longer, and what might you do differently moving forward with this information, so that we can reimagine and build a new world that we want to pass on to our children and our children's children. I think that's the invitation that's calling us forward, is to reimagine and build a better world than we've ever known before. So from there, this season 3 of Lead with Love, we're going to have a few more episodes, a few more conversations, and really around this theme of I'm not hiding, I'm healing. And that will be just a few more conversations. And so my vision for Lead with Love is that we'll have seasons and kind of encapsulate them into a theme that we can move forward with, and really reimagine and build a better tomorrow, a better future, a better world collectively. So I'm really excited to have these conversations with you. And just thank you so much, Michele, for having this conversation with me. It's been such a gift to have you in my corner. Yeah. So until our next conversation, just invite you to give yourself the same compassion, space, and grace to heal whatever needs to be healed, and to know that you are not hiding, you're healing. Thank you so much for your heart and attention and listening to Lead with Love. You can always get the links and resources mentioned in each episode over at leadwithlovepodcast.com so that you can build a sustainable business and live a creative life on your terms. If this message, Leading with Love, resonates with you and you want to take a stand for remembering that there are humans with beating hearts behind the numbers, I would love for you to subscribe so you never miss an episode and leave an honest review. It would mean the world to me, and it also helps more people spread more love in the world, which we really, really need. I also love hearing from you. So as you're listening, take a screenshot, share your favorite takeaway, and tag me on Instagram and Facebook at Jada Selner. I really appreciate you, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.